So our next speaker is an associate professor at the International Center for Studies in Creativity here at Buffalo State. She is also currently serving for 1 year as the interim director of the International Graduate Programs for Educators Leading Creativity and Educational Initiatives in partnership with 56 international and American schools throughout the world. This month, she received the President's Award for Excellence in Teaching here at Buffalo State. Fun fact about her, she has delivered creativity courses on 5 continents and 12 countries. Please welcome Dr. Susan Keller-Mathers.
Thank you. For me, it's comforting to be in a place that's familiar. The sights, the sounds, the way people behave are somewhat predictable. But I know that if I do not stretch myself to go to places that make me uncomfortable, that I'm missing critical opportunities to grow creatively. I think about children in the future, and I think about the fact that over half the job types that they'll be employed in the future don't even exist today. In the last 9 years, 180 billion apps were downloaded from the Apple Store. It's amazing. And I ask myself, will we even need apps in the future? I have no idea. I have no idea about any of that. But what I do feel strongly about is that there's a critical need for creativity and problem solving in a rapidly changing world. I say to myself, what is it that I want to bring? What kind of things do I want to experience to show my creativity and to model for others the way that I think we can make the world a better place? And for me, it might be different for others, but for me, it centers around travel. Because I'm forced to go forward, and I'm forced to put myself in a situation that's very different. And then I'm forced to use my creativity. So I ask you, what makes you uncomfortable, in which you need to practice complexity, you need to tolerate ambiguity, you need to look at things in a different way? So for me, it's travel. So I want to share a bit about that today and the way travel has engaged my creativity. And what I realized is that as an educator who studies creativity, that this has been one of the primary ways that I've grown to be more creative. Because as a kid, I was curious. My father was an airline mechanic, so I did a lot of travel. As I grew up then, it really turned into this passion for exploring the unknown. So I want to share a few things about that today. Mary Murdoch and I taught a course in Oman. And while we were there, of course, you've got to play a little bit, even though our work is play, right? So we went on an Arabian desert tour. And we're out there with our Jeep drivers driving us around, and we're on the top of a sand dune. And it gets stuck. So we get out of the Jeep and we sit down. We're just, enjoying ourselves, watching. And so I watched the driver go ahead and floor the gas. And I watched the tires spin. And as he floored it more, the tires continued to spin. Now, some of you may have had a familiar situation like this, all right? So as it's going, what's happening? He's going deeper and deeper into it, because some of us are Buffalonians. And we know that even in this really exotic place, the place that challenged my sense of what's normal, I was able to think of a situation that was common for problem solving. So, being a problem solver, I couldn't help myself. I kind of motioned to him and went, and he looked at me and shook his head. He did not have a shovel. So we were pretty much stuck until a Bedouin man came by with his beautiful Jeep with GPS tracking for his nomadic travels and shoveled us out. So as we're sitting there watching all of this, because it's fascinating, he had his son with him. Son was probably 4 years old. And the son just, got out of the Jeep, went over, found a little blade of grass, and started playing with this blade of grass. And as I'm watching this young child, it reminded me about imagination. It reminded me that sometimes you have to peel away all the complexity of your life and find something simple that reminds you to clear those things and to use your imagination. And here he was with just this little blade of glass, enjoying himself. So those were two things that I learned in Amman. I learned many things, but two things that I learned is that I can take situations that are so uncommon to me and I can find some commonalities for problem solving. And that to remember to peel away the complexities of my life and to use my imagination. And who better to teach me that than a small child? Another experience told me that sometimes I'm not as clear in what I communicate as I thought I was. I know you probably never had that experience, but sometimes people look at me like, what did she just say? So I was in Beijing, China, with my girlfriend, Deb, and we were outside of the city, and we were in a restaurant, so we get the menus, and we're expecting pictures on the menu so that we can pick something relatively normal to eat. There were no pictures. So my friend Deb, who's an equally good problem solver, is also an early childhood educator. And she decided to demonstrate to the waiter what she wanted to eat. So she's sitting there and she went, buck, 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 buck. When the waiter looked at her stunned, she felt he must need a more robust demonstration. Buck, 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 buck. So she got up, it was like a chicken dance. She went all over the room, buck, 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 buck. The waiter left and never came back. Okay, so we finally did get something to eat, but it definitely wasn't chicken. I never knew that the sounds that we make for animals are not universal. I thought everyone clucked for a chicken. That this just blew me away to think, oh my goodness, that's not universal. Who knows what that man thought? And so I said to myself, wait a minute, what other cultural norms do I take for granted? What other assumptions do I make that I really need to question? You know, we often think of things in different ways when we're creative problem solving. I've got to look at it a different way. We want lots of different ideas. And I said to myself, I need to question my assumptions because I truly thought that that communication would be clear, and it certainly wasn't. You may have experienced this. So you don't have to go to exotic places in order to have those experiences that put you into a situation that is suddenly unknown or one that you need to question. So you're in line at the grocery store, and somebody is in back of you way too close. First thought, trying to steal my wallet. Second thought is they're trying to push me. I'm going too slow. I think it's an act of aggression. But you need to step back and say, not every culture has the same level of space. And so before I get upset or before I assume that that person is trying to rush me through, I need to think about the fact that there may be other reasons for somebody to be a little too close. And that's just a small example. But often, I suppose that happens in cars too, but there's a lot of things going on with cars. So the whole idea of being somewhere familiar and looking at things differently. Buffalo is a very diverse community. We have wonderful people and places to visit. So I ask yourself how often, whether you're in Buffalo or Beijing or anywhere that you're at, when you're in a familiar place, to think about how you might go outside your comfort zone and engage with people who are different and engage in situations that are different. And it could be a matter of just going a couple blocks or going into a store that you've never gone into before. I lived on Lafayette Avenue in Buffalo for 26 years, and I'd drive down the block. And one day, maybe 20 years into living there, I went, I've never noticed that house. Well, these houses were built in the 1906, 1907. So I'm not observing, even in my own backyard, as well as I could. And I know that, again, if I put myself in different situations, then I have the opportunity to grow. I want to share one last story. This is a story about a group of people that I find fascinating. I work with some adult educators at international and American schools who, as children, grew up in multiple countries. So they may identify with a home country, perhaps a place where their parents were from. But they're not necessarily from that. They're coined third culture kids. They're global nomads. And I find them to be more flexible, more open to figuring out new situations quicker. They embody a lot of the creative elements I've talked about today. And I believe part of that is meeting new people in new places, being engaged with different languages and different cultures. And again, it can happen right in your backyard. You ever go somewhere, you travel, and you ask somebody next to you, where are you from? Sounds like a question you would ask. But for these people who grew up in different countries, that doesn't make any sense to them. They're not from anywhere, they're global nomads. And they see things in a way that are rich and in a way that has a problem-solving mentality. But I ask myself, and the reason I bring this up is I've been watching how people problem solve and how they can figure out these situations or are really good at assessing a situation and seeing more than I might normally see. And I said, how might we be able to benefit from something like that and gain skill and understanding and attitude like that without having to live all over the world? So what I leave you with is the thought that go outside your comfort zone. Travel to places that are different. Look for people who are different. So you can meet new people in strange places. You can meet strange people in familiar places. And the idea is that challenge yourself to feel uncomfortable, but most importantly, do it because you want to engage in places with people that are different. Thank you.